home, right?
Well,
Good.
Alabama. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. It's already mid-May, which is hard to believe. I thought April just came to an end. And so here we are in May. Our last Authentic Leadership Live was just a few weeks ago, so it wasn't that long ago. And if you were with us, we were talking about a topic that is very connected to this topic. And so for those of you that have not joined us before, welcome. Every month, we hope to dive into the essence of leadership through genuine storytelling, sharing unique perspectives, and exploring hot topics to inspire and empower leaders on their journey to authenticity and success. And so here at Schaefer Leadership Academy, our mission is really focused around this very thing. Our mission at Schaefer is to really guide individuals to develop their leadership potential wherever they're at. And so first, we're just going to go around and introduce ourselves a little bit. You probably are familiar with Tisha and I if you've watched Authentic Leadership Live before. And we have a wonderful guest with us, James. So again, my name is Ailish Wasserman, and I am our program director at Schaefer Leadership. And my mission in my career journey as a professional is to really cultivate confidence and inspire self-discovery in one's journey, in one's professional or career journey. Tisha?
Thank you, Ailish. And there you are. I want to tell everybody out there, for a minute, we couldn't see Ailish moving, but she's back with us now, but we could hear your words. So it was all the same. So good morning. I'm Tisha Gerhart. I'm the Chief Facilitation Officer at Schaefer Leadership Academy. And I look forward to these sessions every month, just the simple conversation, because I think this helps us answer some questions we already have and also develops the conversation to explore it more for ourselves. I think about self-accountability. Wow, that's a huge one. So I'm looking forward to the conversation with James. My personal mission is to inspire and make a difference wherever I'm at so that people feel valued and add value to others.
Love that. All right. And of course, our special guest with us is James Joseph. So, James, tell us about yourself.
Oh, wow. Where do I start? First and foremost, thank you for having me here once again. Um, these things are always inspirational. I always get that from you guys and get that from Schaefer as well, and just other people that have been, surrounded in my professional development over the years. And it's been a wonderful journey. So, with that being said, I'm James Joseph, finance manager here at in Shelbyville, Indiana, at Salmon Brothers Incorporated, family-owned car dealership. Been around since 1918. Been around a long time. Um, and my background is in banking and just all out leadership and just inspiring people. So, this is a good fit for me.
Well, and before we get started, Ailish and I decided on red, but James has something red to show us too. So it is a Red Friday, everybody. Woohoo!
There you go. All right.
I love it. I love it.
Yes. So today, our title for this conversation is Ownership and Action, Leading Yourself First. And I do want to mention that, you may be following us on Facebook or LinkedIn. Please feel free to put comments and we'll see if we can get to those, if not now, later. We want this to be interactive as well. And so this is about essentially self-accountability. That is what we're talking about. Leading yourself first. And that is not always the easiest thing. It might be easier to lead other people than yourself first. And so I kind of want to just open up and really, ask everyone, but really ask James, looking at when we think about self-accountability and leading yourself first, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
Taking responsibility, saying this is on me. That's where it starts. That's it's kind of the acronym, with owned, you own it, you take full responsibility, hey, this is on me. What happened, and then what is the next step? So those are, that little acronym own. And once we get into the workshop, we will dive a lot deeper into that. We're just scratching the surface. So for me, that's exactly what it is. And and not just professionally, right? So just with things that you do in your everyday life, whether it be, raising your kids, talking to your neighbors, no matter what. So that is a very important acronym that I have adopted into my life. So
Hmm.
That's good, James. That's good. When I think about self accountability, it's a responsibility. For me, it's how I show up. It's expected. Um,
yes,
and to me, those are things that matter personally. And if how can I hold anybody else accountable if I don't hold myself accountable? So it's a sense of responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I think that that sense of responsibility, and you talked about, James, like in your life holistically, we're talking about this, but, and also just thinking about, um, at work and specifically in leadership, when we're thinking about leadership, and we always like to talk about leadership, you can lead from wherever you're at, right? So you don't have to have that particular title or have people report to you. But when you think about yourself as a leader, and we think about that topic of that responsibility and accountability, why might that be so difficult for leaders out there? Why might that be a challenge?
looking in the mirror is hard. Looking,
Mhm.
because sometimes we are not our own best critic, and being able to look in the mirror and say, you know what, hey, I could have done that better, and it probably started with me. You know, it's a self-teaching point that it takes some practice, and sometimes it starts out with the little things. Like I do this. I always reference my kids a lot. There may be a fork left in the sink. Oh, that's my mistake. I overlooked it. Okay, but we wouldn't be having the conversation had we paid more attention to detail. So it's almost like, you just have to peel back and take a look at the situation as a whole. And if you can pretty much figure out where it started, and if it started with you, then, take some ownership. If it started with someone else, there's a very good chance that you probably had a hand in that also. So it's really about being fair to yourself, being fair to the situation. And this is just how we build better relationships amongst coworkers, whether it be your children, your neighbors, no matter what. So that's where I'm at. That's it.
Well, and I like that you brought up to me it's holistic as well. It's too hard being two different people. I don't want to be,
Uh,
so holding myself accountable in this space and not in this space. I, I think once we're aware of it, we can acknowledge it and we see opportunities to even do better. Oh, wow, I might have not handled that like I should. It's that vulnerability piece that we most often talk about in relationships. And it's not easy because our own pride, ego, just as you mentioned, James, we get in the way. I
Absolutely.
sometimes think we should carry mirrors with us. I guess we have our phones usually, but
That's
still.
true. That's true.
Mhm.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Like, I think what stood out for me there is just owning your mistakes, and owning what happened. And that is not always easy. And you just mentioned ego as well, Tisha, and just, especially if, we are leading a team or leading a project or wherever, what have you, being able to be that vulnerable and transparent and owning that mistake in front of others that look up to you. I that is something that I think can and really be a challenge, and is something that, a lot of leaders are continually practicing.
Well, and hearing you say that, Alicia, it makes me go back to the one of the tools on crucial conversations is why would any rational, reasonable person do that in purpose? And normally you think about mistakes that we make, it's a mistake. However, I don't want to see what James's reaction is going to be, that he might be upset at me. And so but we have to, talk about it a little bit and share, because most of us don't do things wrong on purpose. We just don't notice, or we need some coaching, or we need some feedback so that we're aware. Um, I just this morning, last night I had a session, and it was at late afternoon, and it was with an organization, and there's usually about 6 folks in the team that come, and somebody had messaged me out of that group and said, "There's only 2 of us. Would you mind rescheduling so that we all can come to the class? Are you open to that? If not, that's okay." well, sometimes there's a couple other people that come from another department. And so I responded, yeah, that's fine. That makes sense to me. And I wasn't thinking about these other two, and they haven't been to my class. They haven't came for probably 2 or 3 months. Anyhow, I received a message from one of them that said she came and we weren't there. So I had to own it, is what I'm trying to say. I had to own that. It was up to me, and I just didn't think to communicate with them because I hadn't seen them for a while. But anyhow, that's just an example of just me this morning having to say, that's on me. I apologize for that. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. This is when we're going to meet again. I hope that, this works for you. So anyhow, just a little story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm curious, James, if you have any thoughts or examples or experiences with, owning up to mistakes or seeing others own up mistakes and how that is done well, or maybe is done not so well.
Absolutely. So I coach, right? And I think this is probably the rawest form of owning your mistakes. So, it's football, and I get the kids when they're young. We're talking fourth, fifth, sixth grade. And a lot of times, the feedback is what's more important, like Tish was just saying. So the feedback I feel like is the most important piece because no one ever knows if they're doing anything wrong unless you give them some feedback to let them know that, hey, that probably wasn't the best, avenue of approach. So, just how, we attack things, in our life to be able to build that platform of trust between, coach and player or, boss and coworker or any of your work colleagues. That also becomes like a part of your body of work. That feedback is a very important piece. I actually had a kid tell me, well, coach, I didn't know that I could show up to practice 5 minutes late because no one ever said anything to me. Oh, well, that makes sense. It's like, you know what? Well, that is my mistake for not clarifying that it is very important that you are here on time. So, that it all just comes full circle. But no, Tish, you hit it right on the head with the feedback piece. That is so important. I mean, no matter what you're doing, I mean, whether it be professionally or just personally, no matter who you're dealing with, that feedback portion is so important. So important.
Well, and my question and my thought when you said that it is, and on the flip side, how should we prepare ourselves to receive the feedback?
Correct.
And that always isn't easy because our emotions, our pride, again, our ego gets in the way. So we have to welcome that feedback in those moments.
Yeah. So as you know about this, the coaching without a whistle, it's how, everyone wants to be in attack mode, right? So it's hey, for example, Tish, I really appreciate what you do here. Thank you for everything that you do. You do this really well, ABC, 1, 2, 3, right? So but I just want to touch on one thing. Okay. This is what I need from you. Okay. And again, I appreciate what you're doing here. Now it's not so bad. And a lot of people may think of it as coddling. No, it's just a better way to communicate, to get your point across because it's very easy to do this, but it's harder to do this. Say, hey, here you go. Let's look at it this way. So, your approach just becomes a lot easier to take, especially when you're giving feedback that cannot be so popular sometimes.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, we often talk, and we've talked on here about radical candor, and that empathy is so important. Doesn't mean you don't challenge directly. It doesn't mean that you're not giving the feedback that needs to be given, but you do it in a sense of caring, because you do care about the success of this person, or you wouldn't be giving them any feedback.
Correct.
That's good. I like that a lot.
Yeah. No, I think we talk a lot about like how to give feedback in leadership, but I just want to emphasize what Tisha just said a few moments ago. How are we receiving that? Because that is really big when it's, again, ownership, taking ownership. And I think everyone can be a little bit different there because how you're receiving that, it's really based on your relationship with the other person, the conversation. Maybe you just you need to let it kind of like, you need to process it, let it sit for a little bit. If it's something that stirs up a lot in you, then, you know, maybe, you know, you don't respond right away. You say, thank you for sharing that, you know, and come back and say, you know, let's talk about this, you know, in another week or something. So kind of knowing, you know, and really I'm also thinking about just your initial response to feedback, how you're feeling, like physically, emotionally, mentally, being in tune with yourself to know what to do in that moment.
Well, and Ailish, I love that you're talking about that. And I know my little thought that came from just hearing you is the accountability piece. And most of us, when holding people accountable, especially if our emotions are high, I just want you to admit that you did it. But true accountability is when I can acknowledge, oh wow, and next time this happens, this is what I'm going to do. How am I going to prepare if this happens again? How am I going to communicate better so that I don't struggle in this again? And so it's the solution
Mm.
that really matters in accountability. And I think it's the same with ourselves. We can beat up on ourselves, or at least I can. I can be harder on myself than what you guys could be on me internally. And so to have that support for somebody to say, okay, Tisha, you did that, but it happens. What are we going to do next? What's the next step? How would you like to move forward? What can I do to help you move forward? And so to me, it's focusing on the solution and what's going to happen next.
You know, I love that part. And I think the flip side of that coin is where, you know, there's a question that you can also ask yourself is how does your accountability affect other people?
Oh, yeah.
How does it affect everyone else? Um, because people are watching, you know, if they feel like that you're not, well, why do I have to? You know,
Mm.
so, and that's a, gosh, we could go on for days.
we could oh I think that's excellent as well. It's this package and it's never ending is what I hear you saying, and it's so true because we've all been there.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you talk about that solutions, because that accountability, it's action, it's behavior. It's not just the conversation. Part of it is receiving that information or sharing that information, whatever way that is going, that initial, the initial steps that you need to take to handle this, whatever it is. But then it's follow through.
Oh,
It's that commitment, right? You talk about a commitment and accountability. I just think about follow through on what you actually are saying.
and most of us, once I say it, I moved on. And we need to come back to it. We need to reconnect. How did that go? And just asking those coaching questions in those moments, because it does matter. However, how much did it matter if I never come back to it?
Right. And that's the thing, like when you're not coming back to it, it's almost like you ask yourself, like, you know, where am I avoiding responsibility? You know, that's a huge one. You know, and that just goes back to that reflection piece of looking yourself in the mirror, asking yourself those tough questions. And a lot of times you don't have to ask those questions in front of people. You know, it's just a one-on-one conversation. And if you're just honest with yourself, I just feel like, you know, everything else will flow a lot easier. Everything will flow out easier. Just avoid
Mm.
responsibility, you know, like what excuses did I make? You know, or what excuses do I make? And how to collect those. And sometimes, you know, we don't like to ask people for help. You know, when you're asking yourself those questions, sometimes you may not have the answer. So relationships are important in how you build them and how you foster those relationships. So,
I love the whole relationship. You know, that matters. If you're going to impact and influence people, and as you mentioned, we're influencing all the time. So it does go back to the people. It does go back to the relationships. Um, it, who are we holding ourselves accountable? If we're holding our, let's see, how would I? It self accountability is holding myself accountable. But if I'm not in tune to everybody else around me, why does it matter?
right.
Mm. Yeah. 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 I mean, that accountability piece of, being tuned in, but also like it just makes me think about, in all of this, there could be things that we're working on individually, like certain personal or professional goals that people may or may not know about, but how we are accountable to those like personal professional goals, even if other people don't know about it, still affects ultimately our behavior and how we're interacting and working with others. And I guess what I'm trying to get at here too is there's just there's things that might not be visible or present to others. Like, for example, you know, if I have a goal to do professional development for myself, and it's only really going to, in my mind, that's only going to affect me. That's not going to affect other people. You know, my team might not see this, but this still is important for me. And this is me really trying to be accountable to myself. I think that there's that behavior of just doing that for myself, again, as James was saying, and we're talking about, also just helps me showcase those behaviors in the workplace as well. So if that makes sense.
It does. It does, Ailish. And how we show up in the behaviors, you know, I think about the impact of our behaviors and what's our intent and what's reality. And that's a check. It's a check-in because I might have an intent that I want to pull people together, but if I'm not willing to admit to my mistakes or my shortcomings, what's the reality there for my team? I'm not connecting. There's a distrust, there's a disconnect. And so just really understanding the impact of not holding yourself accountable and what does that do to the people around you, I think is important in the reality of the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're not in this alone too. I think we're talking about leading yourself. We keep using the word self over and over and over again. And we just mentioned relationships. And so, because there's a part of me that's like, well, hey, if I want to, you know, pursue this goal or do this thing on my own for my own benefit, like I need to do that completely on my own. Mm-hmm. And I think it's about knowing what works for you, because what's going to hold me accountable and work for me might be different than what is for Tisha and James, just because we're different people. And so we have to kind of figure that out. And even in, you know, I've been talking a little bit with Tisha about, you know, kind of personal fitness and personal training, things like that, like doing strength training, doing those types of things. Like just doing it on my own is hard for me. I need someone to be there alongside of me. So who's alongside of you in this accountability that can help you with that self-accountability? Who might you need to bring in? You might not always need to, but you're not alone.
Oh, I like that. It reminds me, you know, we just finished up Emergence at Schaefer Leadership Academy, and we really had folks thinking about their personal board of directors. And so, you know, who are those people that are going to hold you accountable or ask you the tough questions and provide that feedback? And even in the workspace, I think we need good people. You know, Ailish is there for me most often, and I've learned and grown so much because of the conversations we have as reflection. And I've heard her tell me, "Oh wow, Tisha, you're really self-aware," and I appreciate that. Well, it's also appreciation because she helps me have the conversation to be aware.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're not alone. You know, there's a lot of lonely leaders at the top that might think, I need to know it all. I need to do it all.
Don't have to do that. Don't have to be lonely up there.
Not at all. I like what you said about how you show up. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, is within your control. And I think once you couple that with, you know, what's in your control and, you know, and how you show up, again, I just think it makes it easier. It makes it easier for you to have these tough conversations with yourself and how you show up. Because when you say how you show up, most people think, well, it's for other people. No, it's for yourself too. It's for yourself too. So
Mhm.
Well, James, I would love to hear more about your session that's coming up that will really talk more and give some tools around self accountability.
Oh wow. And there's a plethora.
Yeah.
And it's really based around, so how I came up with that, because I'm very hot and heavy into coaching and leadership and just grooming you know people, and especially like our younger generation. And you know there was a coach that said that the greatest thing you could do for our youth is take them places that they cannot take themselves. And um
Mm.
and it starts with being a leader, and most people are not your you know general idea of being a leader, but it doesn't mean you can't instill it and get them there, to be able to think for themselves, communicate effectively, because that's almost a lost trend. It's just being able to communicate the correct way. So this whole thing is just centered around you know owning what you do and owning what you don't do, and how do we fix that. And there's going to be some hard truth and reflection in this thing here. So the caveat is being able to get a lot out of it if you are honest with yourself, and that's where it starts. And trust me, I've had a life full of that. Just being honest with myself. So it'll be great, and I'm ready. So it'll be a good time.
Nice.
Mm.
Well, thank you. I know as folks hear you today with Ailish and uh, what I hear from you is compassion, the love you have for coaching, the ability to connect with people. There's no doubt in my mind it's going to be a fantastic session. Thank
Oh,
you.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah. Speaking of the session, we'll give you a little bit more info for those that are watching. So this is a Shape for Leadership workshop that we're offering in person. So this is an in-person workshop where we host here in Muncie, Indiana at the Innovation Connector. And so it's June 18th. It's called No Excuses, the Discipline of Self-Accountability. And it's a 3-hour workshop. So it is a more in-depth, opportunity, as James is saying, to look at yourself honestly. And so, but this is, our sessions are, they're reflective, they're interactive. You will be with a group of people, and it's a safe space
Mhm.
to be in that place. And so we're excited, James. We'll put a link to register after the session in LinkedIn. But otherwise, yeah, we are almost out of time here. And so just wanted to, before we go, just ask Tisha, James, is there anything else you'd like to share before we head out today?
Just you? Did you
Oh,
did you have anything?
well, I just think about leadership as a journey. And that's one of the reasons Ailish and I really felt strongly about having these online sessions, to be live, to have conversations, to really think about diving deep into topics that maybe we don't always explore on our own. And that's where the conversation, but to be authentic in it, authentic leadership. And that's what I heard today, James, is being authentic. And so that is my takeaway. How we show up, self accountability has to do with the internalness of our own credibility, um, our just who we are as a whole authentically. So thank you for coming in June and doing another session for us, and
Oh,
just being authentic in our journey.
you're very welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that. One thing that I will leave with is that what I've learned about leadership is not about the destination; it's about the journey. So if you keep that in mind, it's not about where you're going; it's how you get there. Because once you get to where you're going, you're going to have so many little tools and nuggets in your toolbox that you can, to give to other people. So,
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's
That's a
good.
that's a great place to end. It's about that journey. And the last thing that I would add to all this whole conversation is, what do you value on that journey? Let those values guide you. Let those values be that guiding light of where you're going. So thank you, James Joseph, Tisha, everyone, for watching. And of course, if you missed some of this, you can watch it online. We look forward to connecting to you next month We're going to
Yes.
continue to talk about transparency, showing your work and leadership. So
Mm.
we'll see you in June and have
All
a
right.
wonderful weekend.
All right.
Bye
You as
bye,
well.
everybody.
All right. See you.
Bye.